Okay, let's really dig into this. We have these two titans, President Donald Trump and Elon Musk, figures who regularly command the world's attention. One in the political arena, the other, well, a huge force in technology and industry. For a period, according to the material you've given us, they seem to cultivate a remarkably close relationship. Almost surprisingly so.
Yeah.
And then, just as quickly as it seemed to form, it dissolved into a very public, rather spectacular, and frankly, surprisingly aggressive conflict.
It truly was a notable event, wasn't it? The source material we're exploring today really captures this rapid, highly visible breakdown, what it describes as an implosion, actually, of an alliance that, for a time seemed quite significant.
Exactly. And that's the core of our deep dive into your sources today. We have this detailed account focused specifically on the breakup of this Trump-Musk dynamic.
Right.
Our goal, our mission here, is to meticulously go through this material, pull out the most important insights, the key details, and understand from this account what happened, why it might have happened, and what the potential consequences might be.
Yeah, and we should stress we're sticking strictly to what's laid out in this particular document you've provided.
Absolutely, just what's in front of us.
And it's clear from the document that this wasn't just some, private disagreement that leaked. The public nature, the platforms involved, X, Truth Social, and the substance of the conflict. It all points to potential ripple effects that extend way beyond the individuals themselves.
Oh, definitely. Touching upon politics, business, maybe even the people caught in the middle around them.
For sure.
Absolutely. So let's rewind a bit, using the source material as our guide, and look at the buildup. Before the implosion, there was this high-profile alliance. How does the source describe the height of this relationship? What did it actually look like?
Yeah. Well, the material paints a picture of surprising proximity. It says that Musk emerged as a, quote, constant companion to the president.
Constant companion.
Yeah, that phrase alone suggests a level of closeness you might not immediately expect between, a tech mogul and a former president.
Right, constant companion. That implies being around frequently, being part of the inner circle, doesn't it? Like really embedded. And Musk's own description, according to the source, takes it even further, if I remember correctly.
It does. The source notes that Musk himself publicly referred to himself as Trump's first buddy.
First buddy. Wow.
Yeah, think about that phrase, first buddy. It's informal, almost kind of familial in a way, and it strongly indicates his perception, or maybe, his desired public portrayal, of a very close primary relationship with the president.
First buddy. It certainly cuts through the noise, makes a statement. The source isn't just relying on labels, though. It provides some concrete evidence of this closeness during a key period, right?
Yes, it points specifically to Musk's frequent presence down at Mar-a-Lago during the transition period after Trump's presidency.
Okay.
The image the source presents is of them seeming to, quote, bask in each other's company.
Bask.
Yeah, that's a phrase suggesting, mutual enjoyment of the interaction, maybe a shared sense of importance or validation, perhaps. It suggests it wasn't just transactional meetings. There seemed to be a personal element, a kind of camaraderie.
That visual is striking two of the world's most recognized figures, seemingly enjoying each other's presence in that very specific high-profile setting. And the public display of affection, as it were, wasn't limited to private clubs. The source includes that widely reported quote from Musk, doesn't it?
Ah, yes, the quote that definitely grabbed headlines. The source notes that in early February, Musk posted something quite attention-grabbing on X, presumably.
Yeah.
I love it, real Donald Trump, as much as a straight man can love another man.
Oof. Yeah, I remember that.
That's an unusually candid and some might say provocative public declaration of affinity from someone like Musk towards a political figure. It really underscored the perceived depth of the bond at that moment.
It certainly left no doubt about his positive feelings towards Trump publicly at that time. And the praise wasn't just one-sided, was it? According to the source, Trump also offered public affirmation of Musk.
He did, yeah. The source highlights that just last week, relative to the timing of this report we're looking at, President Trump presented Musk with a ceremonial key right there in the Oval Office.
A key. In the Oval Office.
It's a formal gesture, right? An official acknowledgement from the President of the United States. Pretty significant symbol.
In the Oval Office itself. And what did Trump say about Musk on that occasion, according to the source?
The source quotes Trump calling Musk one of the greatest business leaders and innovators the world has ever produced.
High praise.
Yeah, high praise indeed, coming directly from the president in a very official setting. So at this height, the relationship involved informal companionship, these public declarations of affection, formal recognition, mutual admiration. It seemed incredibly solid on the surface.
But as the source makes clear, the connection wasn't just about perceived personal affinity or, mutual admiration. There was also a significant layer of financial and political support flowing from Musk towards Trump and the Republican Party more broadly.
Yeah, this is a crucial detail that adds substantial weight to the alliance described in the source. It provides a specific figure. Musk spent at least $288 million in 2024 to help elect Trump and other Republicans.
Wow, $288 million.
Think about that number for a moment, nearly $300 million. That is a colossal amount of money to direct towards political campaigns in a single year.
That kind of financial commitment goes far beyond mere personal friendship or, casual support. It indicates a deep investment in a particular political outcome. And the source notes how some of this was channeled. Did it give specifics?
Yes, it mentions that Musk quietly put together a super PAC with other friends from Silicon Valley.
A super PAC?
Yeah, and a super PAC, for you listening, is a specific type of political committee that can raise and spend, unlimited amounts of money to advocate for or against political candidates, though they can't donate directly to campaigns themselves.
Okay.
So creating one, especially quietly, as the source says, and with other influential figures, suggests a pretty strategic effort to deploy significant resources in the political landscape aligned with Trump and Republicans.
So we're seeing a picture of an alliance built on apparent personal connection, public mutual praise, and a very substantial financial and organizational commitment to supporting the political aims of Trump and his party. The source also touches on a broader trend here, doesn't it? Something about Silicon Valley.
It does. The source mentions the idea of Silicon Valley figures, often seen as maybe leaning more liberal traditionally, increasingly becoming Trump supporters. Musk's actions, as described here, are presented as a prominent example of that phenomenon, indicating maybe a shift in political alignment among some tech elites, or at least a more visible one.
It adds a layer of ideological context to the financial support. This wasn't just like a one-off check. It was part of a broader, potentially growing trend the source identifies. So this alliance had many facets: personal, public, financial, and potentially ideological. Yet, even during this period when the alliance seemed so strong, the source material hints that there were maybe underlying questions or tensions present beneath the surface, suggesting it might have been more fragile than it appeared.
That's a very insightful point the source makes right from the start, actually. It poses this rhetorical question that, looking back, feels quite prescient.
What was the question?
How long a duet could last between two men used to soloing on center stage?
Yeah.
This question immediately introduces the idea that the fundamental nature of these two individuals, highly independent, dominant figures accustomed to being the unchallenged star, might make a long-term partnership inherently difficult, just temperamentally.
Like trying to fit two suns into one solar system. It's bound to cause issues.
Precisely. The source also notes specific friction points that existed even during the alliance's apparent peak. It says that while the relationship with the president seems strong, Musk clashed with other top officials in the Trump administration.
Ah, okay. So not everyone in the orbit was on board, maybe.
Apparently not. So even if the direct line to Trump was clear, navigating the broader political ecosystem around him presented difficulties for Musk, according to this account.
That adds a layer of complexity. It wasn't universally smooth sailing within the administration for him. And the source points to challenges within Musk's own business world that were present even before the public break. Things happening outside the political sphere.
Yes, it mentions that Musk's cost-cutting efforts falling far short of his goals. That's one thing.
Okay, business pressure.
Right. And also, wide public disapproval of the billionaire's role in the White House were factors. The source notes that Musk's close association with the Trump administration was already drawing wide public disapproval, which could create external pressure on him or his companies. And his business challenges, like cost targets being missed, suggest that even his core enterprises weren't immune to difficulties, potentially adding stress or diverting focus.
So we have this picture of a high-profile, multifaceted alliance built on mutual interest and significant investment, but with maybe inherent personality conflicts, difficulties navigating the broader political landscape, and even external public pressures and business challenges already present. All of this, perhaps, setting the stage for things to unravel.
It certainly suggests that the foundation, while appearing strong right at the top, had points of potential weakness or friction embedded within it, according to the source's analysis, even before the big blow-up.
And that brings us to the specific event, the trigger, that, according to the source material, initiated the public implosion of this alliance. What was that turning point?
The source clearly identifies the catalyst. It was Musk's public criticism of President Trump's primary legislative initiative at the time, which the source refers to as the One Big Beautiful Bill.
The big beautiful bill, right. So the break wasn't initiated by, like, a personal slight or a private disagreement that leaked out, but by a public policy dispute over legislation.
Exactly. The source makes a point of highlighting the public nature of the criticism. It notes that Musk began voicing his objections publicly on Tuesday, just 2 days before the relationship spectacularly blew up on Thursday.
Wow, quick turnaround.
Yeah, this wasn't some quiet lobbying effort behind the scenes. It was a very visible dissent.
And what were the specific actions Musk took regarding the bill, as described in the source? What did he actually do?
He used his extensive public platform, X, to directly address lawmakers, urging them to, quote, kill the bill.
Kill the bill, that's blunt.
Incredibly strong, direct language for someone who had been perceived as such a close ally. He didn't suggest amendments or adjustments. He called for the entire legislative package to be scrapped.
Kill the bill.
Yeah.
No ambiguity there at all. And he also raised specific concerns about its financial implications. Was it about the money?
Yes, the source states that he repeatedly warned that the plan would add to the deficit. This was a central theme of his public criticism, focusing on the potential fiscal irresponsibility of the bill.
Okay, the deficit. And the source provides some context for that deficit concern, referencing the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO.
It does. The source mentions that the CBO had projected the bill's price tag would be $3 trillion over the next decade.
$3 trillion?
Yeah. The source notes that the administration disputed this estimate, likely offering a lower figure or a different interpretation, but the CBO projection provided a basis for concerns about the bill's potential impact on the national debt, which Musk was publicly highlighting.
So, Musk is publicly and forcefully criticizing the president's signature legislative effort, citing concerns about the deficit based on projections like the CBO's. What was the initial reaction from White House officials to this public dissent, according to the source? Did they hit back immediately?
Not quite immediately. The source says that White House officials initially insisted that all remain friendly between Trump and Musk.
Okay. Trying to smooth it over.
It seems they attempted to downplay the public criticism, yeah. Perhaps hoping to manage the situation or frame it as just a minor disagreement within a larger alliance, keep things calm.
A bit of damage control, maybe. But that official line didn't hold for very long, did it?
Not at all. The source explicitly states that President Trump's public broadside on Thursday made clear that was not the case.
So Trump himself stepped in.
Yeah. The president's reaction signaled that this was far more serious than a minor policy difference, and that the alliance had indeed fractured very, very publicly.
And from that point, the source describes this situation escalating incredibly rapidly, morphing into a full-blown public flameout, essentially a social media showdown played out for the whole world to see.
It truly became a spectacle almost instantaneously. The source notes that the quarrel escalated rapidly, moving from Trump's initial public comment to just a flurry of angry posts exchanged on their respective social media platforms, X for Musk and Truth Social for Trump.
Yeah.
The speed and the public nature of the escalation are key points highlighted by the source. It just caught fire.
Let's trace that escalation step by step, as the source lays it out. Where did Trump's initial public reaction occur? Where did he first signal the break?
It happened right in the Oval Office. The source describes Trump speaking to reporters there before a meeting with the German chancellor.
Okay, very public setting again.
And the quote the source provides from that moment is quite telling. Trump said, "Elon and I had a great relationship," past tense.
Ooh. Yeah.
And then the line that confirmed the break, "I don't know if we will anymore."
I don't know if we will anymore. That was the public signal that things had changed dramatically. And as you mentioned, it immediately spilled onto social media. What specific points did Musk make on his side of this rapidly escalating fight, according to the source material? What was he posting?
Well, the source details several points Musk made on X. And importantly, he didn't just stick to criticizing the bill anymore. He launched direct political attacks on Trump himself.
Oh, really? Like what?
The source notes he wrote on X that he agreed Trump should be impeached and replaced with Vice President J.D. Vance.
Wow. Okay, that's That's huge.
Yeah. That is a monumental shift in rhetoric from someone who had just months before declared his, quote, love for Trump and spent millions supporting Republicans. Calling for impeachment and replacement is about as far as you can possibly get from being a first buddy.
That is a dramatic escalation in his political stance, according to the source. He went from supporting the president to suggesting his removal from office and replacement by his VP. What else did he focus on?
He continued to issue economic warnings, expanding beyond the deficit impact of the bill to broader policy. The source notes he warned that Trump's tariffs would cause a recession in the second half of the year.
Okay, so criticizing trade policy now, too.
Yeah, so he positioned himself as someone concerned about the overall economic health, potentially contrasting it with Trump's trade policies.
And he even used the moment to float the idea of a completely new political direction, something about a new party.
Yes, the source highlights that in the midst of this fight, Musk asked his massive following. The source mentions 220 million followers, whether it was time to create a new political party in America that actually represents the 80% in the middle.
Interesting timing.
Yeah, this suggests he was using the conflict as an opportunity to explore the potential for a political movement distinct from the existing parties, positioning him as potentially as a leader or maybe just a catalyst for such a movement.
A new party, impeachment calls, economic warnings. That's a broad and rapid offensive from Musk, according to the source. The source also mentions a specific symbolic action he took, something about social media again.
It does. As a clear public break from Trump's immediate circle, the source notes that Musk unfollowed Stephen Miller on X. Miller is described as one of Trump's top aides.
Ah, the symbolic unfollow.
Right. And the source adds context by mentioning that Miller's wife had been working for Musk, adding a kind of personal layer to this symbolic digital action. Makes it a bit messier.
Yeah, that unfollow, in the context of these high-profile figures and their reliance on platforms like X, carries symbolic weight, as described by the source. Now, beyond the policy and political attacks, the source notes Musk made a particularly explosive and controversial accusation.
This is perhaps the most dramatic point detailed in the source's account of the public fight.
Yeah, the source notes that Musk declared it was, quote, time to drop the really big bomb.
And then made the accusation that Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT.
Whoa, the Epstein files. The source itself provides some important context for this specific accusation, doesn't it? Why is that relevant here?
It does, and it's crucial context. The source notes that files related to the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein have been a point of fixation for Trump, his allies, and right-wing media figures.
Right, it's a recurring theme.
Yeah. It also mentions that there has been speculation, importantly without evidence, among some groups that government officials have engaged in cover-ups to protect famous associates potentially linked to Epstein. So this context shows that Musk was tapping into a very sensitive and highly speculated upon topic that was already politically charged.
And crucially, what does the source say about the evidence for Musk's specific claim connecting Trump to the withholding of those files? Did he back it up?
This is a critical detail from the source, and you're right to ask. It explicitly states that Musk, who has a history of making and amplifying false claims, offered no evidence for his accusation.
No evidence.
Right. So while making a highly provocative and potentially damaging claim, the source points out that he provided zero substantiation for the assertion that Trump's presence in the files was the specific reason they were not made public.
Okay.
The source also notes that Musk later posted video footage of Trump and Epstein partying together decades ago, which, may have been intended to imply a connection, but it did not provide evidence for the core claim about the files being suppressed because of Trump.
So the source highlights the gravity of the accusation while really underscoring the lack of evidence provided for that core claim about suppression. How did the White House respond to this specific charge, according to the source?
The source quotes White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, who described the claim simply as an unfortunate episode for Musk.
Unfortunate episode. Kind of dismissive.
Yeah, it seems to be a concise attempt by the White House, as described in the source, to dismiss the accusation without directly engaging with its specifics, just framing it as bad judgment on Musk's part.
All right, that gives us a clear picture of Musk's side of the public fight. A rapid-fire series of political attacks, economic warnings, hints of a new political direction, symbolic gestures, and a highly controversial, unsubstantiated accusation. How did President Trump respond to all of this on his platform, Truth Social, according to the source material? What was his counterattack?
Trump's response, as detailed in the source, focused heavily on, well, financial leverage and casting doubt on Musk's motives. The source quotes Trump delivering a direct threat to Musk's business interests.
What threat? What kind?
He said that the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts.
Wow. That's direct.
Yeah, and he even added, perhaps to imply previous restraint or maybe a contrast with the current administration, I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it.
That is a very potent threat, going straight for the economic jugular of Musk's companies. And the source provides crucial context for why this threat is so significant, right?
Yeah.
About Musk's business model.
It does. It's really important context. The source notes that Musk's businesses are heavily reliant on automotive regulatory credits, as well as space and defense contracts.
Right. Government money.
Exactly. These are areas where government policy and contracts play a massive role in their profitability and operations. And to emphasize the scale of this reliance, the source cites a Washington Post analysis, which found that Musk's companies have received at least $38 billion in government money.
$38 billion. Okay, so when Trump threatens to terminate government subsidies and contracts, the source makes it crystal clear he is threatening a revenue stream and support structure worth tens of billions of dollars to Musk's enterprises.
Yeah.
That gives the threat immense weight within the context of the source's reporting. Beyond the threat, Trump also offered a counter-narrative for why Musk was suddenly opposing his bill, didn't he? He had his own theory.
Yes, he explicitly suggested that Musk's public objections were not, as Musk claimed, primarily about the deficit or the bill's supposed pork, but were actually rooted in concerns about Tesla's business fortunes.
How so?
Specifically, Trump claimed it was because the legislative package would slash subsidies for owners of electric vehicles.
Ah, the EV subsidies. So he was essentially saying Musk's motives were purely self-interested, tied to the financial health of his company, Tesla.
Exactly, that was Trump's framing.
And the source provides context on Tesla's situation at that time that Trump might have been referencing. Was Tesla struggling?
It does. The source notes that Tesla was, quote, reeling from a 71% dip in profits and a double-digit slip in sales in the first quarter compared with the same time period last year.
Ouch. 71% dip in profits.
Yeah. This detail, provided by the source, shows that Tesla was indeed facing significant financial headwinds, which lends some, though not necessarily conclusive, support to Trump's claim that Musk might be particularly sensitive about policies affecting EV sales and subsidies at that moment.
So, Trump's argument, as presented in the source, is that Musk's sudden opposition wasn't principle-based, but profit-driven, specifically because the bill would impact a source of revenue or demand for Tesla. The source includes a direct quote from Trump elaborating on this point.
Yes, in comments to a reporter, Trump is quoted saying, I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here. He had no problem with it. That's a key claim.
Okay, claiming Musk knew it and was fine with it.
And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate because that's billions and billions of dollars. So this quote is powerful because Trump is claiming insider knowledge of Musk's previous stance and directly linking his sudden opposition purely to the financial impact on electric vehicles.
That's a direct challenge to Musk's stated reasons for opposition, basically accusing him of hypocrisy or, opportunism. Trump also included some personal jabs, according to the source, went beyond the policy.
He did. The source notes that Trump seemed to anticipate Musk's criticism turning personal, suggesting maybe that Musk misses the place, presumably referring to access or influence within the administration or proximity to power, sort of a sour grapes angle.
Okay.
He also employed a familiar political framing, characterizing the hostility as common among former associates, saying it's sort of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess they call it.
Ah, TDS.
Yeah. This attempts to dismiss Musk's criticisms as just irrational personal animus, rather than a substantive policy disagreement.
Attributing the conflict to a well-known syndrome is a way Trump often framed the position, as the source implies. And he made a point about the timing of Musk's criticism, too.
Yes, the source mentions Trump posting a defense of his legislation and stating, I don't mind Elon turning against me, but he should have done so months ago.
Implying it was too late or maybe unfair timing.
Yeah, it suggests Trump felt the timing of the public criticism was a betrayal, coming late in the legislative process after a period of perceived alliance and support, like a stab in the back.
Okay, so we have Trump's side focusing on financial threats, questioning Musk's motives as self-serving due to potential impacts on EV subsidies, and using personal characterizations like TDS. How did Musk respond specifically to Trump's claim that his opposition to the bill was really about protecting Tesla's finances? Did he address that directly?
The source notes that Musk addressed this directly in a post on X. He denied that flat out. And he said he never saw the text of the bill.
Never saw the text. That's his rebuttal to Trump's claim that he knew the inner workings and was fine with it earlier.
Exactly. He denied the premise that he was fully informed earlier and had changed his tune based on the EV mandate cut.
So he denied the premise, and he continued to hammer the bill itself, even while addressing Trump's specific claim about his motives.
Yes. The source quotes Musk adding, basically in response to Trump's accusation about his motives, whatever, keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. Very unfair, he added.
Okay, so conceding the EV part but calling it unfair.
Right. And then he doubled down, but ditched the mountain of disgusting pork in the bill.
Mountain of disgusting pork. That's strong language, clearly expressing deep disapproval of elements in the bill beyond just the EV provisions Trump mentioned. Does the source material give us any insight into what Musk might have been referring to as pork? Did he specify?
Well, the source explicitly states that it's unclear what Musk was referring to with his references to pork. It acknowledges his strong language, but notes the specific targets of that label weren't identified by Musk in this particular context.
Okay, so just a general accusation of pork.
Yeah. However, the source does list some of the elements that would be included in the bill according to its reporting, so we can see what was actually in there.
Okay, what elements does the source list as being part of the bill?
The source mentions that the bill would extend tax cuts and make good on Trump campaign promises to eliminate taxes on tips and overtime.
Okay, tax policy.
Right. Those are specific policy elements. It also notes the bill would increase spending on immigration enforcement and defense and make a major reduction in the number of people covered by Medicaid.
Okay, so spending increases in some areas, cuts in others. A mix of things.
Exactly. So the source provides details on the bill's contents, which include things like tax policy, spending increases in certain areas like border security and defense, and significant cuts to a major social program like Medicaid. While the source doesn't clarify Musk's pork reference, it does lay out other significant components of the bill that he might have been broadly criticizing under that label, alongside his initial concerns about the overall deficit impact.
So the source walks us through this escalating, very public, and frankly, quite aggressive exchange charges, countercharges, threats, and dramatic accusations, all playing out on social media platforms that both figures command. This wasn't just a political disagreement. It really was a clash of powerful personalities with significant resources and massive public platforms. What were the immediate impacts and reactions noted in the source material from this dramatic event? What happened right away?
Well, the source points to immediate financial consequences that registered in the market pretty clearly. On Thursday, the day of the most public fallout, Tesla stock fell sharply, closing down 14%.
14% in one day. Wow.
Yeah, that's a significant single-day drop, and the source connects it directly to this public feud. A tangible financial hit.
A 14% drop in Tesla's value in a single day is a concrete financial impact tied to this event, according to the source. And it wasn't just Tesla that saw a financial hit, was it? Something else mentioned.
No, interestingly, the source also notes that the value of Trump's meme coin also dropped.
His meme coin.
Yeah. This lesser-known asset associated with Trump also experienced a negative market reaction to the public conflict. It shows how widely the financial impact, as reported by the source, could spread to assets linked, even peripherally, to these individuals.
So financial markets reacted swiftly and negatively to the public breakup. What about the impact within government or the political sphere, beyond just the legislative path of the bill itself?
The source mentions that Musk had been involved in a specific government initiative, something called the U.S. DOGE Service Project.
DOGE Service, okay.
Yeah. It notes that this project was already winding down anyway around the time of the implosion, with many of his aides who have been working on it returning to their private businesses. So that specific collaboration seems to have been naturally ending, maybe coincidentally.
But the source highlights potential risks for other individuals who were involved with Musk and also remained in government. People still working there.
Yes, it raises a cautionary point, stating that others, however, who have remained prominently in government and who are perceived allies of Musk could now potentially face retaliation.
Retaliation from whom? Trump's side.
Presumably, yeah. This suggests that being associated with Musk within the Trump orbit could suddenly become a liability following this very public breakup, potentially putting individuals in difficult positions. You know, guilty by association.
That's a significant potential consequence for people caught in the middle, as highlighted by the source. And as we touched on briefly earlier, Musk's criticism of the One Big Beautiful Bill itself also had a documented impact, according to the source, on the bill's chances.
It did. The source states that Musk's increasingly sharp and public criticisms of the bill have already complicated the measure's path in a closely divided Congress.
How so?
Well, in a political environment where every single vote can count, having a highly visible and critical voice, especially one that had previously been seen as an ally, could potentially sway opinion or maybe provide cover for others who were hesitant to oppose it. It just makes the legislative path more difficult, according to this account. Adds uncertainty.
So the fallout had immediate financial and political consequences, affecting markets, ongoing projects, individuals in government, and the legislative process itself. The source also offers perspectives from people close to this situation, speaking anonymously to provide some maybe insider insights. What do these individuals share?
One ally of Musk, speaking anonymously to the source, expressed surprise mainly at the speed of the public conflict, saying the unraveling happened faster than I thought.
So even insiders were surprised by how quickly it blew up.
Yeah, it suggests that even those close to the situation were caught off guard by the rapidity and the very public nature of the breakdown.
There was also some intriguing speculation offered by these anonymous sources about Musk's underlying motivations, wasn't there? Something pretty big.
Yes, one anonymous source shared a rather bold speculation. What Elon really wanted is to be president, I think.
Whoa. Okay, presidential ambitions.
Yeah. This perspective introduces the idea that Musk's political involvement might be driven by ambitions for the highest office itself. It offers a potential interpretation for his actions and political maneuvering, as presented in the source, framing it in a much larger context.
That's a powerful interpretation of his actions, suggesting a much higher stakes game than just, influence or policy debate. And these sources saw this public fight as representing something larger than just a personal spat between two guys.
Crucially, yes. The source quotes one anonymous perspective viewing the public fight as the public surfacing of a fight between the tech right and the populist MAGA movement.
Tech right versus MAGA.
According to this view, while these two groups share some goals, maybe on certain economic issues or deregulation, they disagree deeply on several issues. So this frames the conflict as potentially an ideological struggle between different factions on the right, one focused maybe on technology and reform, the other more populist and focused on other priorities like maybe trade or immigration.
So it's presented not just as Trump versus Musk, but potentially as a proxy battle between different wings of conservative or right-leaning thought. And what specific quote from this perspective captures that dynamic, as noted by the source?
One person is quoted saying, "It was a rejection by MAGA and Congress of technocratic reform and instead keeping basically status quo on everything of consequence."
Technocratic reform versus status quo.
Exactly. This interpretation suggests that Musk's efforts represented an attempt to push for systematic changes, perhaps driven by a kind of technocratic, efficiency-focused viewpoint, but that these were ultimately rejected by the dominant populist MAGA movement and the legislative body, who preferred, in this view, to maintain the status quo on core issues.
And this perspective viewed Musk's overall efforts in Washington as ultimately unsuccessful then, a failure.
Yes, this anonymous source concluded it was a total loss for Musk. Their view, as reported in the source, is that Musk and his allies came to Washington hoping to enact significant systematic change, but ended up with policies like high tariffs and a legislative package that, in their view, contributed heavily to debt rather than the fundamental reforms they might have sought.
Total loss. Okay, moving to outside reactions from the financial world, how did investors respond based on the source material? We know the stock dropped, but what were people saying?
The source quotes investor Ross Gerber, who is described as previously having been a prominent Musk supporter. Gerber's reaction on X was one of pure alarm. "Can someone please take the phone away from him? WTF, Tesla is getting destroyed."
Yeah, that sounds pretty alarmed.
Definitely. And in a text message to the source, he added, "My God, this is bad for Tesla and Elon." This shows the level of real concern among investors watching this public feud unfold in real time.
His reaction sounds like genuine distress over the situation and its impact on the company. What was Gerber's assessment of the power dynamic between Trump and Musk in this confrontation, as quoted by the source? Who did he think had the upper hand?
Gerber is quoted offering a pretty clear assessment on that. Elon is mistaken to think he has anything like the power Trump has.
Okay, so he saw Trump as much more powerful in this fight.
Yeah. This suggests that from a seasoned observer of political and business power, Trump held significantly more leverage in this public fight, particularly perhaps the ability to inflict damage through political means.
And Gerber specifically warned about the kind of damage Trump could potentially inflict, according to the source. What could Trump do?
Yes, he highlighted potential areas of retaliation. Gerber warned that Trump could launch investigations into Musk's companies and his immigration journey.
Investigations. Immigration journey.
Yeah, and the source provides relevant context here about Musk's background. He was born in South Africa, came to the U.S. as a graduate student in 1995, and interestingly started his first company, Zip2, before he technically had legal permission to work in the United States.
Oh.
This detail from the source underscores why Gerber might have pointed to Musk's immigration status as a potential vulnerability that Trump could target using the levers of government.
That's a stark warning about potential legal or regulatory actions Trump could pursue, leveraging government power against Musk's businesses and even his personal history. Gerber's overall assessment of Musk's actions in this public fight sounds quite harsh based on the quotes.
It is very critical. The source quotes Gerber offering a very critical view. He's destroying everything he's built and all the people who've supported him along the way.
Wow. Destroying everything.
Yeah, it suggests a belief that Musk's actions were self-destructive and damaging not only to himself, but also to those who had invested in or supported him over the years. A very strong condemnation from a former supporter.
Beyond investors, how did Republicans on Capitol Hill react to this high-profile feud between two figures significant to their side, as described in the source? Were they quick to jump in or take sides?
Well, the source notes that some Republicans seemed wary of picking sides, which kind of makes sense, right? Both figures command significant attention and influence, and alienating either could have political consequences down the line.
Walking a tightrope. The source includes a quote from Rep. Anna Paulina Luna that seems to illustrate this cautious approach.
Yes, she is quoted attempting to navigate the situation carefully, saying, "I obviously support the president, and I obviously support Elon's perspective on DOGE, and so it is what it is."
It is what it is. Trying to support both.
Yeah, by supporting both figures on different issues, Trump politically and Musk on a specific topic like cryptocurrency regulation, presumably related to that DOGE project mentioned, she illustrates the balancing act some Republicans might have attempted. Stay out of the crossfire.
But not all Republican reactions were so measured, according to the source.
Yeah.
Some took a stronger stance.
No, definitely not. The source highlights a much stronger reaction from Rep. Troy E. Nehls of Texas, directed squarely at Musk.
What did Neil say?
The source quotes Nehls saying directly to Musk, "You've lost your damn mind."
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. He called Musk's statements irresponsible and certainly not healthy, so stop. This is a clear and forceful public rebuke from a fellow Republican.
Very direct.
Very. However, the source also adds a little nuance by noting that even in this condemnation, Nehls still acknowledged Musk is very gifted and talented and successful. So maybe attempting to frame the criticism as being about this specific behavior rather than a complete dismissal of the person.
So a range of reactions from caution to outright condemnation within the Republican Party, according to the source. And Vice President J.D. Vance also publicly weighed in, given Musk had suggested him as a replacement.
Yes, that's an important piece. The source notes that Vice President Vance publicly aligned himself firmly with Trump on X, rating, "President Trump has done more than any person in my lifetime to earn the trust of the movement he leads. I'm proud to stand beside him."
Okay, leaving no doubt where his loyalty lay.
Exactly. A clear statement of support for Trump in the context of the public dispute with Musk, especially significant given Musk's earlier comment about Vance replacing Trump.
Okay, we've gone through the material section by section, detailing the buildup of the alliance, the specific trigger event, the minute-by-minute public flameout on social media with all its dramatic accusations and counter-accusations, and the immediate fallout and varied reactions from markets to political figures, all strictly as presented in this source account. Now let's try to zoom out slightly, still using only what's in the source, and connect some of the dots. What might this entire implosion signify based only on the insights and details provided in this document?
Okay, well, based purely on the source material we've just walked through, we can look at this conflict as being driven by multiple factors that kind of collided spectacularly. As the source hinted early on, there's clearly a significant personality element that clashed between two men used to soloing, right? Finding it difficult to share the center stage or maybe operate within the constraints of a less hierarchical relationship. Ego, perhaps.
Yeah, the two sons problem. And the source presents competing arguments and evidence about the potential role of financial interests in driving the conflict. That seems central.
Absolutely. Trump explicitly claimed Musk's sudden opposition was all about protecting Tesla's EV subsidies, especially given Tesla's falling sales figures cited in the source. Musk, on the other hand, while denying having seen the bill's full text beforehand, raised concerns about the overall deficit, highlighted what he saw as unfairness in cutting EV incentives while leaving oil and gas subsidies untouched, and threw around those broad pork criticisms. The source lays out these different claims about the financial drivers, showing it was a central point of contention and accusation from both sides. Money was definitely part of the argument.
And as the anonymous sources suggested, the conflict might reflect deeper ideological tensions as well, beyond just personalities or money.
Yes, the source includes that perspective, framing the fight as a public surfacing of a division between the tech right, perhaps associated with ideas of technocratic reform, and the populist MAGA movement, which, according to this view presented in the source, favors maintaining the status quo on key issues. This interpretation, drawn directly from the source, suggests the clash wasn't just personal or financial, but also maybe about different visions for policy and the role of government within the broader right-leaning coalition.
This whole event, as detailed in the source, also really highlights the immense power of public platforms in modern political and personal conflicts, doesn't it?
Without a doubt. The source's step-by-step account of the rapid escalation on X and Truth Social just vividly shows how these platforms enable powerful figures to engage in direct, highly public, and often incredibly aggressive battles, making serious accusations, sometimes, as the source notes, without evidence.
Yeah, like the Epstein claim.
Exactly. And how these exchanges can have immediate visible consequences, like the market reactions, the Stark drop, the meme coin drop, real-world impacts from digital fights.
And the source makes it clear that despite the spectacle of it all, there were tangible risks involved, real stakes.
Precisely. While the source calls it an irresistible spectacle, which it certainly was, it immediately adds that it was an action with potential consequences for the government. The report consistently underscores the political and financial risks, including potential retaliation against individuals in government perceived as allies, and the complication of legislative efforts, all as described by the source. It wasn't just a Twitter spat.
So why does dissecting this specific implosion, using only the source material we have here, matter to you, our listener? Why should you care about this billionaire versus former president feud?
Because, as this document lays out in such detail, it provides a fascinating, almost granular, real-world case study right at the intersection of immense wealth, powerful technology platforms, political power, and frankly, huge personalities. It's not just celebrity drama, it's an illustration of how these forces interact in really volatile ways, how quickly powerful alliances can form and then dissolve, and how those dynamics, played out so publicly, can potentially influence policy, markets, and the political landscape you live in.
It kind of pulls back the curtain, based on this one account, on the dynamics of influence and conflict at the very top echelons, showing how public platforms can be weaponized and how accusations and threats, whether substantiated or not, can be deployed with immediate, measurable effect.
Yeah, it gives you a framework drawn directly from this source for understanding the complex interplay of personal ambition, financial interests, ideological differences, and the tools of modern communication in shaping political events. It's a snapshot of power in the 21st century, maybe.
Well, we've taken a comprehensive deep dive into this specific source material, following the narrative thread from the surprising closeness of the Trump-Musk alliance through its dramatic and very public collapse. We've examined the details, the different claims about motives, the accusations, the threats, and the immediate fallout, all strictly within the confines of this account.
We've unpacked the figures, the quotes, the specific claims and counterclaims, and the various reactions as described in this document, aiming to understand this specific event as thoroughly as possible based only on the information provided to us here.
So, here's a final thought for you to consider, drawing only from the themes and details presented in this source material we've discussed today. Given the extreme nature and the intense public visibility of this breakup, particularly thinking about the threat of leveraging government power for investigation and contract termination, and the deployment of highly sensitive, unsubstantiated accusations like the one concerning the Epstein files. What might this specific event suggest about the evolving norms, or maybe the limits of conflict between powerful figures using their public platforms in the political arena today? And, perhaps relatedly, taking into account the anonymous source's provocative speculation about Musk's potential desire to actually be president. How does the insight gained from analyzing this public conflict, as presented in this source, color your understanding of the motivations behind such high-stakes, very public displays of political and personal antagonism we sometimes see?
Those are certainly complex questions that emerge directly from the material we've just explored in detail. Lots to think about there.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into your source material. We hope that by meticulously going through this account, we've provided you with a much richer, more detailed understanding of this particular event and the dynamics at play, based strictly on the information contained in your document.